God responds to suffering with rescue. But the story isn't over. The Exodus gets Israel out of Egypt. The Exodus gets Israel out of Egypt, but the rest of the biblical story is getting Egypt out of Israel. Okay? The Exodus gets Israel out of Egypt, and the rest of the story is getting Egypt out of Israel. And that turns out is far more difficult. One of the most profound warnings in the Bible is that if we do not learn how to live into our freedom, we risk trading one set of chains for another. We just slide back into those comfortable patterns that keep us stuck. So today we're going to explore how God forms a rescued people into a genuinely different kind of community. And we're going to ask the question that Israel had to answer again and again and again for ourselves. And that question is this: who or what is forming us? Who or what is forming you? Who or what is forming this community? This brings us back to where we began. I said early on in this series that we often think that our choices are guided only by the facts. Right? We only ever make choices based on the facts, based on reality. When in reality, we make choices based on the stories that we believe. We based our choices on the ways that we already see and perceive the world to be working. All of us are being shaped all of the time. There is no neutral place to stand. There is no imagination left unformed. And that's why one of our church's primary focuses, one of our 3 F's, is formation. Because the stories that we trust shape us. So who or what is forming us? Who or what is forming you? Because the greatest threat to faith usually is not disbelief. The greatest threat to faith is usually malformation. We are being formed by stories every day. Not just from Scripture, but from headlines and algorithms and the relentless urgency of our news cycle to keep us clicking and scrolling and feeding, which always works out really well. I know I sleep so much better when I spend 20 to 30 hours online the day before. These stories tell us who to love and who to villainize, who to blame and who to turn into a hero, what to want, and what we're willing to excuse or justify to get those things. All while it metastasizes into this kind of spiritual defect. The greatest threat to faith is not simply disbelief, it's malformation. Exodus 19 is where we're going to pick up the story today. Exodus 19, verses 4 through 6. And we're going to be in a couple different places today, so you're welcome to follow along in the Bibles if you can find it. But we're going to skip around a bit. Most of the important stuff will be on the slides. This is God telling Moses what to tell the people. He says, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on the eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the Israelites." Exodus 19 opens with Israel at Mount Sinai, and they're a people freshly freed from oppression. They still have the tan line of shackles upon their wrists. They have no institutions yet. They have no land. They have no army. They have no king. They have no infrastructure. All they have is a shared story of rescue and the God who brought them out of their oppression. But this story is not about privilege. It's about purpose. What did a priest do in the ancient world? What do priests do? The easiest way to explain what a priest does is a priest stands between God and people, hopefully mediating the love or the presence of that God to the people, and hopefully not acting as a barrier between God and people, although there are evidence of both those things. Israel was not chosen instead of the nations. Israel was chosen for the nations. This goes back to Abraham's calling from a couple weeks ago. God said, "I will make you a great nation, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." This is our shared calling. I also said that as the church, we are woven into spiritual Israel. We share this calling. We share this purpose to be one priestly people together. The church has long named this the priesthood of all believers. And this is such a beautiful and very Baptist way of saying that every one of us is invited into a real, direct life with God, with no mediator of the earthly kind, at least, standing between us, telling us how we can approach our relationship with God. No spiritual middlemen, no hierarchy of holiness. I don't get to wear a cool hat because I stand up here every single week, although, I mean, if you wanted to make me one, I would probably wear it. God meets us all where we are, and God sends us all from where we are. This means there are no spiritual elites in this room, no gurus, no inner circle. I'm standing up front not because I'm closer to God, and a lot of you would go, we know. It's simply because one of the ways that I serve is with my mouth. And this community is full of wise, faithful, Spirit-led people who serve as priests every day in quiet, costly, creative ways. This room is full of priests. When those of you who have walked through pain and healing make space for people who are still hurting, you are being a priesthood of all believers. When we forgive one another, when we tell the truth in love, when we stay committed to restoration instead of walking away, when someone says, I really liked being snowed in this week, then we are being a priesthood of all believers. We're priests for each other. We're priests to each other. And here's how I would define it, even better than before, as I reflected on it this week. As the priesthood of all believers, we stand between God's love and whatever is blocking that love from being felt by another. We stand between God's love and whatever, and so we are not there to block the love, but we are there to open up the passageway for God's love to be felt in any given moment. We help one another take steps towards freedom and healing and deeper understanding of that love every single day. And this calling does not stop at the doors of the church. To be a priestly people in the world means standing in the gap with both gentleness and courage. It means refusing to turn people into problems or enemies in a polarized culture. It means carrying God's love into hard conversations, not as combatants, but as witnesses of a different kingdom. This is our vocation. This is our calling. This is our purpose, to reflect the faithfulness of God together for the sake of the world that God loves. Let's rewind back to the Israelites for a moment. In the very same way, our public life is meant to become a living bridge between God and the nations. The nations just means everybody else. Everybody else. which is why the Torah, or the law, matters so much. We don't often know what to do with the Hebrew Bible sometimes as Christians, and there's a lot of really odd things in there from time to time if you're reading carefully. All the commandments in the Bible were not and are not a set of private, universal moral rules. Okay? They are not a timeless, abstract ideal dropped from heaven. The law is good and holy, and it meets Israel where they are on their journey, but it always points them towards one step further. Never back, always ahead. It's better to think of the commandments in the Bible as the charter of ancient Israel's priestly community. And we have the responsibility to continue to negotiate and to creatively understand what that charter looks like in our day and time, as long as we're taking steps forward and not taking steps back. The law in the Bible details how Israel should order economics, should order relationships, should order time and power and care for the vulnerable, so that their very social fabric becomes a sign of God's invisible kingdom made visible. Israel's calling is not simply to believe something. It doesn't do you any good to tack the Ten Commandments on any wall. That's not the point. The point is to live together in a way that tells the truth about who God is. Deuteronomy 10 makes this unmistakably clear. So now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord and his decrees that I am commanding you today for your own well-being. Together, these practices answer one central question for ancient Israel. What kind of community keeps Egypt from finding its way back into our hearts and our habits? The whole story is that these people have been set free from Egypt. They're out of Egypt, but Egypt has a tendency to creep back into them. What kind of community keeps Egypt from finding its way back into our hearts and our habits? And as such, the Ten Commandments are not abstract rules. They are very wise guardrails for people prone to yank the wheel off the side of the road. They interrupt the most destructive patterns of both the ancient world and our world, patterns Israel left behind in Egypt and would meet again in Canaan. And they guide God's people towards a more humane, just, and faithful way of life. Every command protects freedom. Every command trains love. Every command requires that we continue to ask, what does this mean for us today? And the good news is that many of these practices are already alive among us. I don't have time to go through all of them, but I'll hit some big ones. I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me. Every community is shaped by what it trusts. What gives me deep hope, we're going to talk about hope, kids. What gives me deep hope is watching this community choose trust over fear, turning to prayer instead of panic, and responding with generosity and open hearts, time after time after time again. You shall not make for yourself an idol. Idols are anything that promises safety or meaning apart from God. We all carry one of them in our pockets. Mine's over there. Yet I see this community resisting that pull. the very bondage that God freed us from. We are a community that slows down. Sometimes real slow, but that's okay. We slow down, and we stay present, and we try our best to remain faithfully rooted in a world that is constantly trying to pull us to and fro. And for that, I commend you. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. This command was never primarily about cuss words, by the way. It calls us to reflect God's character in how we live. Speaking the truth with love, refusing to use God to harm others, and standing with those who are vulnerable. And I see that all the time among us. Remember the Sabbath day, whether that is on Saturday or Sunday, and keep it holy. I see this lived out when we choose presence over pressure. I see this on Sunday mornings. I see this in our committee meetings. I see this when you gather together in your formation groups. To make space for one another and to trust that we're more than just what we bring to the space, our anxieties and our worries or the things we think we can produce. Honor your father and mother. Oh, they're not paying any attention to me. It's fine. Thank you. I'm not trying to call you out. This isn't just about being respectful to mom and dad, although you should. And then maybe you can get more money to put in your offering bank. Thanks. This is about honoring who came before us and to continue to care for one another across generations. And I see this in listening and in shared stories and in an intentional connection that keeps the heartbeat of what this place has always been going. You good? Even as things continue to evolve and change around us, even changes that we wouldn't choose for ourselves. To turn our attention to these guys and girls, I see this clearly already demonstrated in a faith that is not something just to believe, but something to do. With hands and with hearts. I love when they're in the space with us because this is faith taking root among us, right? This is fruit that we will not see. Maybe not, some of us won't ever see until it's fully matured. Deuteronomy 10 says, "Keep the commandments of the Lord and his decrees that I am commanding you today for your own well-being." For your own well-being. I don't know about you, but I need some guardrails from time to time. I need someone to check in on me. I need someone to be like, delete that. You need guardrails? For the Lord your God is God of God and Lord of lords. The great God, mighty and awesome, who is not partial and takes no bribe, who executes justice for the orphan and the widow, who loves the strangers, providing them food and clothing. You shall also love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. We need to realize that every act of economic fairness, every refusal to exploit, every protection of those with no power is also a priestly act, mediating God's love and justice into ordinary life. God is clear, this is how formation happens. Not through isolated spiritual heroics, but through a whole people gathered together, practicing alternative rhythms, creating a culture that is distinct from Egypt's. In the Bible, the law then isn't just a religious code of conduct. It's the spiritual architecture. See if I can read it back. I can read it here. It's the spiritual architecture for a people whose collective life is meant to manifest the character of the God in whom they live and move and have their being. It sounded really good on my paper. It's a mouthful though. Let's break that down. It's how we organize. It's the shape that we hope our life kind of takes. as we continue to figure out what this means, to manifest the love of a God in whom we live and move and have our being, and in whom everyone else lives and moves and has their being. When we forget this indwelling connection, we inevitably reach for something out there that we can control, just as soon as Moses returned, the Israelites had a big gold cow waiting for them. One of the most common forms of religious idolatry happens when we begin to believe that defending whatever makes us feel certain is actually our identity. When that happens, we can lose sight of our deeper calling to be a priestly people called to care for and serve all, not just those we think or believe are worthy of that love. So let me close up with this. Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curse. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. Moses is speaking to Israel at the end of their long journey, right before they enter into the promised land. And he reminds them that God has laid out two very clear paths: life with God through obedience, or harm that comes from turning the other way. This is God's urgent plea to choose the way that leads to life for themselves, but perhaps even more importantly, for those who come afterwards. In biblical usage, life, I don't know if you know this, life isn't about survival. We shouldn't just have to be comfortable until the end of the day, and then hopefully, at the end we might have collected a nice little bit of things to leave to some other people so they can maybe be comfortable and survive until the end too. That's not ever what life was supposed to be like. Life is supposed to be rich and full and abundant. We're supposed to flourish. Not just me wanting me to flourish, I should want you to flourish, and we should want we to flourish. That's why Jesus says, I have come so that they may have life and have it to the full. He's talking about a quality of life that's lived in alignment with God's heart. To choose life is to order our loves, our habits, and our shared lives together around a God who rescues and gives freedom to everyone. It's about being formed and learning to live in a way that allows that love to take root and to flourish first within us and then within one another. So the question isn't ever, hardly, whether we believe. That's not the question. It's like kids on a playground, okay? One group might wear the same colors, right? How many of you have been on a team? You have a shirt, right? The other team, not the same shirt, right? So you can tell who the enemy is. Who do you want to have a really competitive, fun time with on the field? They repeat the same chants. They agree on the same things, right? It gives them a sense of identity and purpose, a sense of belonging. How many of you know that the Super Bowl is coming up soon? I'm glad to see not as many hands as I thought was going to raise this morning. How many of you have a team in mind? How many of you just want everybody to have a fun time? Belief is baked into the way we're human. Belief, it's not, remember a question about whether you believe. We believe. We are meaning-making, believing creatures. The question is always whether what we believe is shaping something in us that looks like life. The real question is not whether we believe, but how those beliefs are shaping our lives. Many of us, I was reflecting on it this week. I wasn't going to bring this up, but we're here and you're not going anywhere. I have a sticker on my water bottle that says, "My back hurts and I hate the government." And some of you laughed. Some of you didn't laugh when you saw that sticker. For me, that's just peak millennial humor. Because, I grew up where I was promised stability if I followed the rules. And I was promised protection, and I was promised progress, a future that made some type of sense. And I'm 41, and it does not make any sense at all. Instead, I've lived through crisis after crisis while being told to stay calm and stay grateful and stay patient no matter who's in charge. And I have some questions. So when the scripture uses strong language about misplaced power and false gods, it's not being dramatic, it's just being truthful. Something is always shaping our lives. The question is just what? And at the same time, we can laugh about that and also express our great gratitude for the lives that we do have and the places that we do have. And acknowledge that the spiritual life is never about escaping the world. It's about learning where we stand. It's about living in the world without letting it decide who we are. It's about giving our deepest allegiance to a different kind of kingdom altogether. We're called to be a people who live differently and who love differently. We're called to be people who tell the truth all the time. We're called to be people who notice and name what competes for our loyalty to this way of life. And we're called to be people who forgive and who carry one another's burdens and who care for those who are vulnerable, and to stop copying the ways of Egypt and begin reflecting the life that God is bringing into the world. And I know, based on conversations that I've had with you this week, that right now that calling can feel heavy. Maybe you believe all this and you're also really tired. Because you still have to get up tomorrow. Whether or not our kids go to school on Monday or, whether or not the roads work, we got to get up. We got to do life, go to our jobs, pay our bills, and yet we still carry the weight of a broken world on our shoulders. So here's what I want to offer you today. Here's how I want to close. Are you breathing? Yeah, we're all breathing, but are you breathing? Intentionally. Are you taking a breath? Are you sitting still? Are you breathing? Are you, before the noise begins, are you remembering that you are not God? And the world is actually not really on your shoulders. So maybe start there. If you're looking for something to do, how about this? Look someone in the eye and speak kindness out loud in a world that seems to hide kindness in a corner. Hey, all the chaos, it's not going anywhere. It'll wait. So how can you find time to listen for the voice who calls you beloved instead? You are not called to heal the world by yourself. You are called to be part of a people who live differently within it and look around, because we are not doing it alone. God is at work within us together. So, Chestnut Grove, may we be people shaped by not by fear, but by faith. Not by exhaustion, even when we're tired, but by hope. And not by the world's continuing to seem to just break apart every chance it gets, but by the God of love who is always mending it back together. May it be so. Amen.